you have an insane story to me. You have an absolutely insane story. How did you actually get into this company in the first place?
I went to college for 1 year, realized I was terrible at school. Already kind of knew that in high school.
What were you majoring in?
Creative writing, but it was like, that was just,
It was just, you're just like a freshman.
Easiest path,
yeah.
And then I realized, I did some, like, fuck around with my buddies in high school and, like, film stuff. I had a flip camera, realized I was into that, and had the moment of realization, which probably should have happened, like, my junior year of high school when they're like, hey, think about what you want to do in your career. I was, like, halfway through my first year semester. I was like, oh, there's schools that you can go for, like, film study and, like, filmmaking and stuff. I was like, fuck, I want to go there. I had no grades, no experience, so I couldn't, like, transfer there. I had to get some experience. Found a 1-year film program, which was, like, a certificate program for, like, everyone in my class was just, like, for, like, shooting weddings and stuff like that. Yeah. It was basically like a 1-year boot camp. But that was going to get me enough experience to transfer to, like, a USC or Emerson or whatever. And then in the summer in between going to, like, Emerson, I saw a video of Dave. He was running for mayor. And he was like, it was in the office. He was running for mayor, and he was like, I'm running for mayor of Boston. Like, if you want to help the campaign, if there's anything you can do, reach out, let me know. And I was like, dang. Like, at the time, I was applying for other, like, summer jobs. I was literally sitting at a computer, like, in my school, like, filling out applications on, like, Craigslist or whatever, like, just trying to find a job for the summer. And I was like, oh my God, like, this is it. Because my school, part of the tuition is, like, they teach you stuff for a year, and then for a year after, they have all the equipment, sound, lighting, cameras, and part of the tuition you can use and, like, rent that equipment out for a year.
Oh, okay.
So my pitch was like, I'll work for free and I can provide all the equipment.
And I'll bring the equipment. And okay. So that's and then they just, like, what you were hired as an intern? You were brought in as, like, a
Weird haircut Seth. So weird haircut Seth in the video. The what an idiot, what a fucking idiot. Weird haircut Seth. Like when he tried to throw the football.
Yeah.
That was who they told me to apply, and I had an email, which obviously we brought up on PMT, where I, like, misspelled a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
I sent that email, like, just every day. Like, I just copy and pasted it, sent it again. So I never even spell checked it. I, like, literally was just sending it to him over and over again. Finally, like, Gaz called me. He was like, oh, we have a shoot tomorrow with Todd McShay. Like, can you come help? Edit it, basically. And then I showed up, and he was like, we need, how are we setting this up? What are we going to do? Like, we need you to, like, I was like shitting my pants because I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. And then, so yeah, I just basically was working underneath Gaz as an intern for, like, 6 months.
And now you are an integral part in the #1 sports podcast. And I guess that's what's, like, so fascinating to me is that I think you and you alone, I don't even know who the close second would be. When I watch old stuff that you're involved in and I see you now, it's like almost, I'm not talking like physically unrecognizable. I mean, like your role almost, and like the way, and I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. Like when you walk around this office, that you have the respect of, like, everybody in this office. You have, like, that's why I honestly thought you're, like, maybe my boss. Like, I thought there's a world where, like,
people
but it's because, like, you carry yourself in such a way that I think everybody respects you. You're held in such high esteem that it is, like, actually shocking for me to go back and watch you being, like, duct taped to a wall. And I don't know. And even, like, when I go back and watch, like, old stuff from Dave, he's still, like, everybody changes a little bit in some ways, but it's still, like, yeah, that's the same sort of guy, and Dan's the same way. Everybody, like, sort of feels the same way. You feel like you're completely different. Do you feel that as well? Do you feel like you have changed immensely in the last, 10 years now?
Yeah, I think 10 years. I mean, I basically, there was, like, an exact moment where it happened, which is kind of nice to be able to, like, the bookend, old me, new me, like, because I was 19 when I started. I was a fucking idiot, like, just a shithead, like, absolute shithead. Had no idea what I was doing, just, like, fucking around. And I was like, oh, I'm working at Barstool. Like, I didn't, I obviously took the job seriously, but I also didn't have any perspective of, like, oh, this is going to be my career. Like, This is a great opportunity. I was just, like, having fun with it, doing dumb shit. And then Dave, like, basically at one point I asked for a raise, like, a couple years in, and he was like, we don't pay you because, like, you're good at your job. Like, it's funny when like, you fuck up and I yell at you, like, people like it. But that, like, hurt me, but also was kind of like an ego check of, like, all right, I got to get good at my job, whatever. But I also kind of played into it. It was like, oh, well, I can just fuck up. It doesn't even matter. Like, that's the whole thing. And then me and Caleb did, like, the Dixie tour. So we were on the road, living on a bus, touring, like, the South. And Dave, like, yelled at me for something. Like, Caleb made a decision Dave took it all out of me. Like, he was screaming at me. He's like, "You never cease to fuck up. Like, you never cease to like amaze me how bad you fuck up." And I was just rattled at that point. I was like 22, and I kind of had the moment of like, all right, I think I'm gonna leave. Like, I've done it to myself. I've put myself in the situation of being a fuck up, and like people are always gonna think I'm a fuck up.
Yeah,
it's no one's fault but my own. But the only way to get out of it is like to leave, because like I'm never gonna be able to like shake this. So I like made up my mind. There was like 2 weeks where I was like, once this tour's over, I'm quitting, or like I'm leaving. Like I'm gonna probably try and go back to school, whatever. I'm still kind of young. Like we were at all these schools. Like it was so fun. There were so many girls. It was like, oh, I can just go back to college. Like I'm 22. Like being a 22-year-old sophomore is not that crazy. And we did a like Mets Cubs World Series where we were in New York, and then we drove the bus to Chicago. Kevin, Dan were on it with like me, Caleb, and Ben, and like Caleb and Ben drove the first shift. We slept. We woke up at like 5 a.m. and did the like 5 a.m. to Chicago shift. And I told Kevin and Dan, obviously, because they were like the OGs, I was like, I think in a couple months when this leaves, like I'm gonna leave. Like it is what it is. Just want to let you guys know. And that big cat literally told me, he's like, I think you should stay. Like this guy Peter Chernan's, and because they had issues with Dave too. Like there was a lot of drama. Like they were always kind of fighting.
Yeah.
I'd go on the road and Big Cat would kind of tell me like his issues with Dave or whatever. So I thought it was gonna be like a relatable, like, oh, I figure you guys will understand this. And Big Cat was like, no, things are changing. This guy Peter Chernan's gonna buy the company. We're gonna move to New York, and like I'm gonna start a podcast with PFT that I want you to help with.
Wow.
And after that, it was like that's where I kind of had like the second chance where I was like, all right, if I'm going to do this now, I'm going to take it way seriously. Like I'm going to go all in and just like work my way out of the reputation. And that's kind of how it played
I mean,
out.
One of the videos I think I stumbled across was in prepping for this, or like learning your backstory and all that sort of thing, was like a video that was like going through the interns at Barstool through the years. And I didn't recognize anybody else. Like, and it just stood out to me that at this company, there's so many just characters that pop in. Like you said, you're kind of like maybe a circus character in some way, and then inevitably you flame out and you were the flavor of the month and you go away. And I guess like that's what's so crazy about you, is that like not only are you obviously super successful at this point and you have reinvented yourself, but just like for you to step into a world where like this just simply doesn't happen, where like nobody, I don't know. I don't know everybody who worked here, so I don't know if there are other examples of this. But like that's just like it is like shocking to go back and watch and think about like the guys that work here now, if they were in the role that you were in then, and the idea of like someday them being the producer of the number one, So I guess like, do you think the humble answer is that you're just lucky, but like what? So obviously, let's just go with that as the official narrative. But now let's be real. How did you pull this? Like, what skill do you think you have? It was just simply that, because I imagine there are other people that are like, I'm sick of being Dave's punching bag. I'm sick of being not taken seriously. I'm sick of, God damn it, why won't Dave respect me? And I'm sure they had that same approach, and they're not here anymore, or they still are like a punching bag, or they still are like the person they were when they got to the company. Do you think there's something like inherent about you that was like, I'm going to be different, I'm going to make this work? Or do you think it was just like pure luck that like everything bounced your way?
It's mostly luck. It's a large percentage luck. I was able to laugh at myself when I would get like, shit on. I never took myself too seriously. I never thought of myself as like a personality or like someone that wanted to be in content. So it was like, oh, like I literally, for again, those first like 3 or 4 years, it was like, well, at least I'm still getting paid and this is fun. Like, you know what I mean? Like I get shit sometimes. Dave, 95% of the time was great, funny. Like I could talk to him. I talk to him all the time. And then like he would kind of turn it on to the camera and then he'd go like rogue and people would always be like, oh, Dave's such a dickhead to you. And it's like, he's really not. And usually when he's, yelling at me, like there's some level of like truth to me being a fuck up. So I never was like, this is unfair or whatever. So a lot of it was luck. And then a lot of it was really just the fact that, me and Dan got close. I think a lot of the other interns just had summer internships where they were like in college. They just showed up and didn't have stuff to do. When I started, which is the complete luck part, like if I was a week early, a week late, it would have been someone else and they would have taken it. But when I started happened to be right when Dave and Dan and Kevin were like, we're going to start doing more video content. So I was an intern but I was the only one that knew how to like shoot video. Not that I actually did, but technically, like I had at least they
you
would
put it
ask
on a
me,
resume that you could do it.
of the people in the office, I had like the most somewhat understanding of stuff. So we were shooting a lot of videos, and I was editing them all. So I was like doing an internship, but it was a full-time job. So at the, after like 6 or 7 months, I was like, I'm working. I gotta like get another job or whatever because I can't live off $100 a week. And then I got a full-time job, but it was like an internship that was basically a full-time job. The luck part is that they had said that, if it wasn't me, they would have found someone else to shoot those videos,
Right.
and that person probably could have took the job. And then the other reason, like the thing that got me out was really just Dan. Like back in those days, it was just Dave. We didn't really have like money or stuff. So when Dan had and we didn't have sponsors for videos. So if Dan had an idea for a video, we'd go on the road. We'd sleep in the same hotel room, like get like whatever, two queens, sleep in the same hotel room, and we'd just be together the whole weekend, the whole trip. And then we just got super close. So he would always kind of, have my back. Dave would be the good cop. Like Dave would be the mean dad. Big Cat would be the loving and nurturing mom. And he would always kind of like, when I would be like, I don't know. He would always have my back. And then obviously that relationship is what led to him wanting me to produce Part of My Take and stuff. But that is obviously, if that relationship doesn't exist, it's not like I would have got here without that.
Were you smart enough, cunning enough, whatever, to like identify that about Dan and the relationship you had with Dan, or is this just like something now that you look back on and you say like, that was my ticket the whole time, or like when you're in that moment, were you like, if I'm gonna succeed at this company and excel and grow and start to be taken seriously, I'm gonna have to do it by, not to say that you're like leeching on to Dan, but just basically be like, that's a guy that could be my path away from being Dave's punching bag, or was it just something that like worked out that way and Dan just happened to like see something in you? And
yeah, I think it wasn't that, because like I said, I didn't have like career aspirations the first like 3 years. I was truly just like having fun with it.
Yeah,
we'd go on shoots and have fun. Like he was just a coworker. So we didn't have like not that we do now, but like he's obviously like number 2 in the company. It's very obvious. Like he's kind of in that like senior role. At the time it was Dave and then just all the other guys.
Everybody else. Yeah.
And I was, obviously I was low on the totem pole and he was higher, but like we were still just equivalent coworkers. And we were just close, but it was never, like I said, I didn't really have aspirations, and then I just kind of got fed up with it, and I was like, dude, I'm leaving, and he was like, no, I think you should stay. Like I want you to help with this show. But even with the show, like I had no idea, probably for like a year, how big it actually was. Like it was always, because like obviously Dave was good and the best, but sometimes would be frustrating to work with. I'd get shit on and like. It would be tough. Big Cat, we would shoot videos and we would be like very collaborative, talking back and forth. He would take my ideas, which I always appreciated. Like if I had an idea, he'd be like, all right, let's do it. Like, what do you think?
Wow. Yeah.
And then like we would go back and forth with the editing where I'd be like, all right, this is, here's a rough edit. Here are my notes. He would send back notes. So we were always just like very collaborative. So I always enjoyed like going on trips with him and like working with him. But I was never like, this guy's a fucking, like he was obviously super, super funny, but I never... In Boston and Massachusetts, Barstool was always huge.
Yeah.
Like everyone in Massachusetts knew what it was. So when I started working at Barstool, I was like, I'm working at the biggest company in the world.
Right.
I wasn't like, this company is going to, 100x or whatever it is. I already thought it was there. So I was like, Big Cat's a superstar. I'm working, but I was never like, he's gonna become like the number 1 sports
Which is funny because I had the exact opposite perspective when I got into the Part of My Take universe, like episode 4 or whatever, when they needed a March Madness guest. And I've told this story on PMT, but I'll say it again. Like I said yes to the ask because of PFT. I didn't know I knew what Barstool was. I knew of Dan. I didn't follow him on anything. I didn't know what I didn't know anything about him. I just knew him as like one of the faces of those guys. There's a lot of Twitter accounts out there that say Barstool in them. His is one of those. I knew nothing else about him. I knew very little about Barstool in general. I just knew that PFT had gone to Barstool and had started the show, and he had asked me to come on, and I was like, I'm going to do it just because I want to see what PFT's face looks like. That was it. I want to see the face of the guy running this Twitter account, and it's like you said, it's like the polar, it's like flipped on its head for the Boston people because Barstool is like the biggest thing in the world. It's interesting that you said like you never not that you never wanted to be in content, but I think like I would say as someone who knows very little about it, but just piecing this all together, that feels crucial to me that like you go into this company not wanting to be in front of the camera per se, which I feel like for any younger people watching this, listening to this, that is my number one piece of advice. If you want to break into media, I think everybody working at Barstool and other media companies can smell it right away when a kid is hired to be like a PA and you get there and you're just like desperate to be on camera. And it's like, we didn't hire you to do that job. That time will come. We'll give you reps at some point, yeah, whatever, but do your fucking job. And when you earn the right, then we'll do that. And I do feel like you're probably very, very good at that, of like being like, I'm here to do this. I'm going to do this. And as the opportunities have come, you've never like bit off more than you were supposed to.
No, and that was Dan too. Like, cause obviously I was a little bit. I knew my reputation. I knew like if I would say stuff or do stuff, like it was gonna be like not a negative reaction, but like, oh, this kid's such a fucking idiot, like blah 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 blah. And when we were doing the show, obviously when me and Dan would shoot stuff, I was just behind the camera editing the videos. I wasn't like involved in the videos per se. So when the podcast started, he was like, no, I want you to speak up. We'll have like the hot seat cool throne or like the explain to Hank's like. Just be yourself. So I knew Big Cat knew me. Like I knew he wasn't expecting me to like be giving good takes or like whatever. So I knew I could just like say I knew like
he
obviously
knew me. He knew I had no good takes.
Well, no, yeah, I knew it was like I was just trying to be funny. Like that's always kind of been how I was growing up. It was just like trying to make my brother laugh, trying to make my friends laugh. That's kind of been the same thing where it's like I don't care about being taken seriously per se.
Yeah.
If I can get a laugh or like say things for effect that like will get people going, like I don't mind.
Has that changed as you've gotten older and as you've become a little more? I don't know if mature is the right word, because mature feels a little too pretentious. I don't think you need to be mature. I think you can be very immature throughout your life. I don't see the point in being mature, but a little more reserved. I think the way you carry yourself around this office is probably a little more. Are you still game to be duct taped to a wall and shit? Like, are you seeking out those opportunities like that, or like where's your headspace with that? Like, are you trying to be as you're trying to be taken more seriously, and we're in this new iteration of Hank, but also like you work at a company where it's like chaos at all times. Yeah, like where do you fall with that? Because you still are sort of like I don't know, troll's the right word, but you're a foil, I guess we'll say, on PMT in a lot of ways. Like, how is that something you consciously think about? Or no? You just
even with the podcast, I always knew my importance to the podcast was everything behind the scenes. The shooting, editing, helping book guests. Like I took that very seriously, and Big Cat and PFT always knew that, and we always had very serious discussions when they needed to be serious. But the podcast is just jokes, and again, it was I thought there was a point where they were like I was gonna get phased out. I even probably suggested it like. Because I wasn't like, oh, I love, saying dumb stuff on the podcast. It was just like, I like producing the podcast. I like doing all of the, the video. Used to shoot a lot more videos, and we didn't have guest bookers and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was the only editor and whatever. So it was like, I was very consumed with that all day, every day. And I always took that super seriously behind the scenes with people at the office. So I think that's where the reputation came, where it was like, obviously it's jokes on the podcast and people will see the clips and stuff, but anyone that's dealt with me behind the scenes, I think knows like I take it very seriously, and I'm like trying to do what's best for the podcast and then overall the company as things have shaken out.